Season 10 is the most laser-focused year in Simpsons history. I mean, it definitely was up to that point in time. The show had just come off of Season 9, which was a veritable melting pot of different showrunners and their individual sensibilities. With Mike Scully helming all 23 of these episodes, it stands to reason that we're going to get a more unified style here. But, unlike previous showrunners' seasons, this one seems to have very specific goals that it wants to achieve, has a precise and laser-focused point of view that it wants to explore. And that point of view, of course, is Homer Simpson's. Homer absolutely dominates Season 10. He is just all over this thing, even more than usual for the series. Of the 23 episodes, 12 of them feature Homer in a leading or co-leading role. In 4 more, Homer is given his own personal B-plot, and in the majority of the others, he plays a key supporting role. Really, it's only Bart the Mother and Marge Simpson in Screaming Yellow Honkers where Homer takes a backseat role. This year was extremely interested in exploring Homer's identity. Who is Homer Simpson? What does he want out of life? What can others learn from him? They would do stuff like Doin' in the Wind, where Homer J. Simpson discovers his middle name and embraces the hippie lifestyle. Or Homer to the Max, where he completely changes his name, reinventing himself completely. Or how about trying out a bunch of new jobs and side hustles? Throughout Season 10, Homer becomes a grease seller, inventor, personal assistant, bodyguard, trucker, outsider artist, and, just for fun, a boudoir photography model. Now, to be fair, we've seen Homer stretch his wings before, quit his job and try something new. This is a guy who was an astronaut and a barbershop quartet singer in the same season. This is more or less a case of Season 10 landing on the more extreme side of the bell curve in this category. This was an era that didn't want to be constrained by character responsibilities. So, Homer working in the power plant became exceptionally rare. There are about as many scenes of Homer at Springfield Elementary than at his job. There's this sense of, hey, the show has been on for 10 years. Do we really need to justify why Homer's not at work? Let's instead lampshade it, have Homer or Bart comment about how much work or school they're missing. The philosophy behind the show feels more carefree. They're more focused on finding fresh new things for the characters to do, rather than worrying and nitpicking about the context of the series. Say what you want about all the random Homer jobs, but it makes sense. Season 10's gotta keep pushing the envelope. Now, it might sound like I'm describing this easygoing and relaxed season of The Simpsons, full of free-form character experimentation and growth. Like a fun hangout season or whatever. However, the actual vibe of the stories ended up being the exact opposite. Season 10 is full of these manic, madcap adventures, featuring a metric ton of running around. Heck, you could call Season 10 the year of running away from stuff. There are so many chase sequences. Let's run away from the Birdwatchers. Now let's run away from Grandpa. Now the Vegas wives. Now the security guards. Oh no, here comes the rhinos. Honestly, we should have seen this Mark Hamill joke as foreshadowing. When in doubt, just have the characters run away from the episode's problems. Season 9 was all about the grift, the schemes, and the characters' general sneakiness. And yeah, that definitely carried over to Season 10, at least to some degree. You get mobsters selling rat milk, truckers with their auto drive, the school and its cover-up. I think the difference is that Season 10 schemes tended to be smaller and pettier. Like, you're not going to see any trillion-dollar bill thefts or movementarians here. Instead, it preferred revenge plots and smaller targeted heists. The kids versus their parents, Homer versus Thomas Edison, Grandpa versus Homer. Gotta get those characters at each other's throats, you know? That being said, there were negative consequences for all this scheming. Season 10 loved beating its characters up, any chance it gets. And by its characters, I mean mostly Homer. Yes, this was the rise of the over-the-top pain gags. Wherever Homer goes, pain will follow. And it's not just minor stuff, like Homer sticking his hand in a beehive, walking into a cactus, or getting smacked around in a piñata. Oh no, we're gonna drag him through a whole field of thorns, crush him with a car, beat him up on multiple occasions, and maybe throw in a strangling for good measure. They weren't afraid to gross out the audience. Lenny actually gets some of the most wince-inducing moments of the year. That scene where Lenny and Moe get their springs tangled together. My eyes hurt just looking at this. Spoiler warning, this is only the beginning of this kind of stuff. As a whole, Season 10 is considerably more raunchy than the early years. They love them some brothels and porno alleys. Maybe they'll throw in some toilet humor, or some casual gay jokes and a dash of transphobia. Isn't it so hilarious that these women used to be men? Honestly, the late 90s was full of this tiresome edgelord brand of humor, like everyone's vague sense of ennui made us want to go pick fights for no apparent reason. It's like the entire United States was going through 8th grade all at the same time. I mean, yeah, Season 10 isn't exactly the Woodstock 99 of The Simpsons, that's next year, but it does have some of that same energy. We're bored and dissatisfied, so let's break stuff. You know, destroy the school, knock down a bunch of trees, flood a couple of towns. Looking back on it, I kind of feel like we wasted the late 90s. I blame Carson Daly. I suppose at this point, we should probably talk about jerk-ass Homer. By and large, Homer was written as much more blunt and caustic toward others. This is a guy who isn't afraid to tell Marge that she sucks, warn Lisa not to love him, taunt his kids over their new curfew. Homer developed this bad habit of creating a problem and then getting super butthurt when people don't appreciate it. He'll open a Hollywood museum of jerks because they're mad that he can't keep their secret. He'll goad the police into shooting these corporate hippies. And, in the most infamous example, causing his father's kidneys to explode and then leaving him to die. Twice. There's definitely a sense that we shouldn't like this guy, that he deserves everything bad that happens to him. It's jerk-ass Homer, but to be fair, he is usually punished for it. But you also get stuff like Make Room for Lisa, where after basically torturing his daughter throughout the entire story, they want us to consider how hard he has it. Homer's treated almost like an anti-hero during this era. He's generally awful and deserves criticism, but gosh darn it, he's our protagonist. What are we gonna do? Give these storylines to the less funny characters? The Mike Scully era of the show has a reputation for being pretty wacky and absurd with its jokes, but Season 10 isn't that over the top about it. Most of the crazy situations are caused by the characters doing absurd stuff. There's still a groundedness to their schemes. At least most of them. Mr. Burns discovering the Loch Ness Monster is certainly the exception here. I still kinda can't believe that they went for this ending. Other than this though, it's about as cuckoo bananas as your typical Season 5 adventure. If the show is gonna get surreal, it's more likely to be through dreams and fantasy sequences. I think the show hit a pretty nice balance here. Reminds me a lot of how the David Merkin and Oakley and Weinstein years handled these. Not cutting away constantly to some fantastical imaginary situation, but, you know, giving us these small glimpses to demonstrate a character's point of view, or doing a full dream sequence to underline the key conflict of the story. Some of these sequences include memorable screw the audience jokes too. At this point, it shouldn't be surprising to the audience at all that the show keeps surprising the audience with these surprising punchlines for the audience. There's a more shocking and violent bent to some of these, much more in line with the Itchy and Scratchy Land brand of audience hijinks. Season 10 is generally more referential than the last few seasons. Feels like a throwback to Season 4 in this regard, except punchier and more in-your-face about the pop culture stuff. This era was less about doing grand parodies of classic films, and more about dropping these icons into an absurd situation. Jim Belushi showing up on an airplane, Rudy chasing after the bus, Bart and Lisa running through Regis and Kathy Lee, The Simpsons going on Jerry Springer. Or maybe they'll just straight up name drop stuff, like Homer singing the Odd Couple theme, or yelling Jumanji during a chase scene. To be clear, I'm not knocking this kind of referential humor. That Jumanji joke actually gets a laugh out of me every time. And let's be honest, it's not like Al Jean wasn't making fun of Ray J. Johnson back in Season 4 too. Season 10 just took more of a direct path to this kind of stuff. Not surprisingly, this attitude spilled over to how it handled its guest stars. I think Season 10 is the big turning point in this regard. We have When You Dish Upon a Star, an episode that drops Kim Basinger, Alec Baldwin, and Ron Howard into Springfield. Then there's Sunday Cruddy Sunday, their football guest star celebration, which also features America's patron saint, Dolly Parton, as well as some billionaire tyrant guy. In other examples, celebrities would drop in during Act 3 for an important cameo. Maybe do a musical number for us. Naturally, we did get some memorable characters played by celebrities as well. I really enjoy Lisa Kudrow and Fred Willards in particular. In terms of the secondary characters, this was a huge year for Chief Wiggum. Despite not getting a spotlight episode, this guy mixed it up with everyone. He'll go toe-to-toe with Homer on multiple occasions, help Marge with her road rage, yell at the kids about their new curfew. Season 10 loved testing the limits of what these characters can get away with, so Wiggum became very important to these stories. We're also still firmly in the Moe's Sislak era, although this time he takes more of a supportive role in Homer's storylines, along with Lenny and Carl. Lots of check-in scenes at Moe's to see how the story is going. Principal Skinner had a great year too, getting major roles in Lard of the Dance, Lisa Gets an A, and They Saved Lisa's Brain. Boy, they really liked the Lisa Skinner dynamic this year, huh? Mr. Burns fell to the tier with Ned Flanders and Apu, characters who each got spotlight episodes, but were otherwise used sparingly. I would argue that the biggest winner of Season 10, though, is Gil. Not that he had a ton of appearances or anything, he only shows up like 4 times, but they demonstrated that this guy is here to stay. If the show is going to need a salesperson character, old Gil is going to make an appearance. This is usually where I pivot to talking about how Homer changed during this season, but I think we've covered him pretty thoroughly at this point. In this very Homer-centric season, let's see how the rest of the family did. After Homer, I think Lisa stands out the most. She's at least the most independent of the rest of the Simpson family, not as reliant on her father for driving her storylines. However, as a supporting character, Lisa falls into her typical role of pointing out contradictions or explaining elements of the plot. If she's not the lead or co-lead, she's gonna end up as Little Miss Exposition. They are a bit more likely to dump on Lisa during Season 10, or portray her as being a big stick in the mud. To be fair, Lisa does take a lot of crap from people. She's just not portrayed as sympathetically as in previous years. Marge basically lives in hell in Season 10. This year is somehow even meaner to her than the previous one. The show just relishes in dumping on her whenever possible. Sometimes to hilarious effects, other times less so. To her credit, she does seem to be the most self-aware character about these terrible schemes. We do get some amazing Marge sass throughout. And of course, there's plenty of quaint and naive mom jokes for her to deliver. Sometimes they'll give her dedicated B-plots with Lisa to show off this aspect of her personality. Season 10 Marge is considerably spicier and more beaten down, but she does have her endearing moments. As for Bart, well, I gotta be brutally honest here. I hate what they did to him in Season 10. I mean, he's got Bart the Mother, which gives off some of those Marge Be Not Proud vibes, and he's pretty good in Wild Bart's Can't Be Broken and The Old Man and the Sea Student. But other than that, he's essentially Homer's assistant. Like, they did that one dream sequence where he's the boo-boo to Homer's Yogi, and what a perfect homage, because that's pretty much his role now. He's the second banana. He primarily exists to add commentary to Homer's wacky adventures. It's kind of ironic that Bart's featured on the Season 10 box set, because he's probably the most irrelevant member of the family. At least Maggie got that whole alien thing this year. I think in some respects, Season 10 is a misunderstood season of The Simpsons, in that it's lumped in with Seasons 11 and 12, and how we apply some of the weirdness of those later seasons to this one, how we think of the jockey elves or Homer in that panda suit later on, and link it up with the Loch Ness Monster right here, or that nonsensical alligator and how it's like Vincent Price showing up on a bus. I mean, you definitely get glimpses of the future when watching these episodes. But it's not like they've flipped the switch between Seasons 8, 9, and 10. These early years had irrelevant opening set pieces and throwaway B-plots, and so does Season 10. Earlier seasons had these final acts that veered into unexpected directions, and so does Season 10. Structurally, I don't think the show suddenly moved toward this radical, overly absurdist direction. To me, Season 10 represents a shift in focus and overall storytelling style for the series, that they're committing to more of these plot-driven and gag-driven storylines, these fun adventures that take our favorite characters to new places. The emphasis is always on what's happening to them. This isn't the place to go if you're looking for character introspection or deep relationship stuff. When they do a Homer-Lisa or Homer-Grandpa relationship story, they're not going to go into a lot of detail about what the characters mean to each other. That's just not Season 10's specialty. Honestly, the show had done so many Homer-Lisa and Homer-Grandpa character studies that I can understand why they went in this direction. I tend to prefer more of that character relationship stuff, so Season 10 doesn't do as much for me on a personal level. Individual tastes are what they are. But you know, Mike Scully had a responsibility to take The Simpsons in a new direction. Like, I love the Oakley and Weinstein years, but the show can't stagnate. It has to keep trying new experiments. If he had just copied the goals and styles of the early years, you'd be getting a YouTube essay complaining about how the show played it safe. I think there's something to be said for this laser-focused Season 10 that they delivered. That we have this year full of these fun Homer adventures, big character conflicts, irreverent B-plots, and a marathon's worth of running around. Let me know in the comments what you think of Season 10 and how the show changed this year. Do you like the more Homer-centric stories this year? Would you still put it in classic Simpsons? Season 10 has such a distinct flavor to it, it makes a lot of sense why there are staunch supporters of it out there. I'll be back next time for the top 10 list, once I figure out whether Sunday Cruddy Sunday is totally stupid or utterly brilliant. I watched it like 5 times and I'm still not sure. I think that egg painting subplot has broken my brain. As always, thanks for watching.